I've always wondered how a sewing machine works. How can you sew when the needle is going up and down, but the end of the needle doesn't go through? Today, we go inside to see how it works. It's a genius invention. We know that in hand sewing, the needle goes all the way through, and then the thread in the eye of the needle at the end is carried through. Then the needle is turned over and passed through the fabric. It must have been very slow. As we sewed along, someone had an idea. Make both ends of the needle pointy and put the eye in the front. So half the thread would go through, right? Then the needle would go back in and keep going, without having to flip it over. It's a great idea, but here's the problem. The needle doesn't go all the way through, and when you take it back, the thread is brought back. Then we'll have to find a way to do it on the other side. Like this, when the needle passes through, you hold the thread in your hand, and when the needle is withdrawn, the thread is left behind. When the needle comes down again, it goes through the thread left behind. Of course, you still have to hold the thread. The thread that comes down the second time will form a knot with the previous one. Repeat the process and it's fixed. We can't do this by hand, so the sewing machine was born. Try a hook instead, the same way you hook the thread that's coming down. When the needle comes down again, it passes through the hooked thread. When the needle is withdrawn, the hook catches the thread on the edge of the eye of the needle. The needle is withdrawn, and the thread is left behind to form a knot with the thread in front of it. Repeat this, and you're done sewing. Later, they changed the hook to a rotating method. The result is similar. This method of sewing fixed the top and bottom threads, but there was still a problem. If you pull the thread from the end or break it in the middle, the whole thread will come loose. I'm sure you've seen it before. The problem of unraveling seems to be very easy to solve, but it took a lot of work. It was easy because there was only one wire. I finally thought of putting another wire underneath to hold the top wire. The key point is how to make a knot between them. The bottom thread is wrapped around the bobbin. When the needle comes down, the bobbin passes through the upper thread with a swish. This is when the magic happens. The bobbin needle carries the lower thread forward, while the needle recovers the upper thread. When the two threads come together, a knot is formed. This creates a lock stitch. After the above action, the bobbin will go back and prepare for the next stroke. Nowadays, the bobbin has basically become a more advanced rotary bobbin. It's a little more complicated when you're tying a knot down there. Again, when the top thread follows the needle down, there's a bulge in the bobbin. It's like the hook you see above. The thread is hooked and split into two strands and looped along the bobbin. This will cross over the yellow line. After one loop, it hooks onto the yellow thread inside the bobbin. The two strands of thread are then twisted together. When the needle is withdrawn, it pulls the two threads together and completes the sewing process. Repeat the above action and then sew forward abruptly. Let's watch this animation to see it more visually. I have to say, this kind of coordination is really too clever. It's like magic.